Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Svetlana Greenfield and I'm a lawyer in Jerusalem, Israel. I'm head of private law firm which deals with various fields of law and helps a lot to the former Soviet Jews, what was called, who came to Israel according to the law of return. Right now I would like to present you with a very interesting case that we dealt in our office with. Case of Mr. Vitaly Surkov. Furthermore, Vitaly, who came to our office approximately a year ago in 2010 with a terrible situation. Basically what happened is that one day Vitaly woke up in the morning, everything was fine. He came to Israel with his wife from the former Soviet Union, and they started what's called in Israel absorption to Israeli society, to Israeli life. They started to work, they started to learn Hebrew, and everything was fine. But that day he won't forget, probably never. He received a letter from one of the Israeli commercial banks saying that he owes to this bank 47,000 shekels. So that you understand, 47,000 shekels is approximately 10,000 euro, and it's something like 1 year of his work. And of course he was shocked because he never took this loan from the bank. His wife, who also was shocked, asked him, "Did you take this money and you didn't consult me? Like, you didn't talk to me?" Both decided that they should immediately consult somebody, and Vitaly went to the bank. He spoke there to the person, to the clerk, that told him, "Of course, is your name Vitaly Surkov? Yes. So, yes, you do owe us 47,000 shekels." Vitaly had terrible pain in his heart, and he was sent home in the ambulance. When he was able to deal with the situation, he came to the bank again, and then he asked them to show him the personal documents, Israeli ID, Israeli interior passport, Israeli ID, with which the account that was, as argued by the bank, was opened. And the clerks brought this ID. He was shocked because he saw there a different picture. It was falsified. He never came to the city and never opened an account in this bank. That was clear that some organization, and it's not a single person, it had to be a certain group of people who organized all the things. It was only first sign, then it was whole wave of things that were happening every day. He was receiving letters that were saying that he owes money, that his whole open account in certain bank, that he bought things. He bought cars, nearly apartments, a lot of stuff in various chains, in various supermarkets. It was just terrible. He couldn't understand how all the things could happen. He went to the police, and it was very difficult because Vitaly is a simple citizen. He's not some famous actor or famous politician. Police didn't even want to deal with this complaint. Finally, after 3 times that he came there, he just sat on the floor and he said, "Well guys, I won't go from there anywhere. I would like to file my complaint." Finally he was able to file his complaint, and nothing happened. Police has closed the cases. Anyways, he struggled. He didn't give up. He went to the legal assistance office in the Ministry of Justice, and he was granted a lawyer from the state. They filed a motion to the magistrate court, and magistrate court has granted them with what's called declarative verdict. What's called declarative verdict is a verdict that says, that declares that he doesn't owe money to certain respondents. There were 25 of them, various banks, organizations, various supermarkets and such, while he, as was argued, bought things or took money as a loan, but there were only 25. Things were opening and opening. There were new and new cases in various courts and various execution offices all over Israel. And she just didn't have time to go and close everything. All Israeli newspapers and various magazines have wrote articles saying that his life, his identity was stolen. So it was called Stolen Life. They tried to help to resolve this problem. Vitaly has applied to everybody he could, to the office of the Prime Minister, to the office of the President of the country, to the Knesset members, Israeli Parliament members. He applied to the Ministry of Interior. There were a lot of responses that were very, very formal, saying like, "We're very sorry, you're in a terrible situation, but unfortunately we cannot help. We are sorry." But what could he do? What he could actually do? Nobody has told him. On certain stage of all this terrible struggle, he went to the Minister of Interior and he asked, please, he begged, change my identity number. It's like social security number that is given to the person and that follows him during all his life, since his birth, or in his case, since his ascension or his aliyah, his coming to Israel, his first entrance into the country. But Ministry of Interior denied his request. They said they are unable. And they never suggested anything that could really help him resolve this problem. Russian-speaking Knesset members, Israeli parliament members that he applied to, helped him with certain things, but nobody suggested any radical solution for all this problem. And so the time went, and his family was destroyed. His wife went one day and left him because he just couldn't stand all this fear. They couldn't go out of house. They were afraid. They received phone calls saying, if you won't return the money you took, we will punish you. And the punishment promised was terrible. They were afraid for their life. And police did nothing to help them. What was amazing, that police made certain actions during their investigation, but they never came to the point that it was a whole organization of people. All these bank accounts just could not be opened without good organization. Why did police act so? Why didn't it act? It's a better question. Maybe somebody was interested in that. It's a good question, but it's a rhetoric one. We don't have answer for this question. Anyways, the time went, and Vitaly tried, he did everything he could to save his own life, to save his own mental health. He went to the psychologist and he received medicines, and he never gave up. When he came to our office, he had this hope, this last hope that has every citizen, that he will find justice, finally will find justice. The thing I'm talking about is an instance that we have in Israel, which is called High Court of Justice, and it's actually one of the instances that exist in the framework of the Israel Supreme Court. We have this instance since British mandate that was in Palestine since 1914 until 1948, and it was designed so that simple citizens, as for example in our case Vitaly, could come to the court with a simpler procedure and receive orders given as a justice, as a last sanction, last possibility to help a person against various governmental organizations. And what is interesting, High Court of Justice has given really amazing precedent decisions. It did in the beginning of its existence. High Court of Justice has developed all Israeli constitutional law and administrative law out of nothing, just based on the British precedents. Sometimes analysis was based on general principles of the justice, moral, of Israeli heritage, which is actually power given to him in the basic law, the judgment. What is interesting, in Israel there is no constitution as one whole document, that's true. But what does exist, those are so-called basic laws. What is a basic law? Basic law is a law that has a high position, a high status, much higher than regular laws. And as constitutional courts in Germany, France, Canada, whatever, High Court of Justice has declared even existing laws contradicting basic laws unconstitutional, and he moved Israeli parliament to annul these laws, which was a very revolutionary movement. So it was our hope that when we will file a petition to the High Court of Justice, it will stand by his side, by the side of the simple Israeli citizen, and he will say his firm word to defend his human rights, his rights as a person. And that's what we have done. We prepared a very well-based, a very well-argued petition to the High Court of Justice. So it looks. I will show it to you. That's how it looks like, and it has a number. It was filed, and we have attached the whole list of documents that support all this terrible story. For example, we have attached here the copies of the articles from Israeli newspapers in which the identification cards are seen, one and another, which were falsified. This is not a picture of Vitaly Strugov. We attached all these letters that was sent by him, all these depositions from the police station, all his applications to various governmental institutions, as well as a special institution that exists in Israel, which is called State Controller's Office. State Controller's Office that also didn't want to intervene. And we asked the courts, we moved the courts to give certain orders. The orders were versus various respondents, State of Israel in general, that didn't defend his rights for dignity and freedom. What I was saying about basic laws, that there are constitutional laws, there are 11 of them, and there are two most important that were passed by Knesset in 1992, which are called, one of them is Basic Law, Freedom of Occupation, and another which is called Basic Law, Man's Dignity and Freedom. What is dignity and freedom? Dignity and freedom, it means that a person has a right to the dignity. Nobody can take it from him. He has a right to live his life freely, and nobody can disturb him in that. And the state that he pays his taxes to has certain responsibility for the person, that his property may not be taken from him without due process of law. So there were a lot of instruments that were presented to the court to use this power. Another respondent that we filed this petition versus it was Minister of Interior, that we moved the court to give it the order change Vitali's ID number. Another respondent was police, Israeli police, that we moved the court that the police will come and explain to the court what activities have been done during the investigation of his complaint and why no criminal was found during this investigation. Maybe they were not activities that were necessary, maybe they were not done, or maybe they just didn't want to do all these activities that were necessary. And the last respondent was Israeli State Bank, Bank of Israel, which has a specific department that deals with supervision over the commercial banks and how do they manage all the procedure of opening accounts for the citizens, the documents they have to ask from the citizen, how should they check if the person that came to open an account is really a person who presents all this personal data. And as I'm saying, it was very well argued and based on precedents and even quotations from Israeli religious heritage, from Torah. Generally, the procedure is as follows. What follows the petition is the response from the governmental institutions, which are regularly represented by the Attorney's General Office, its administrative department, and usually they have some 30 days to respond. In our case, they asked a lot of prolongations. They never filed their responses in time, and we have granted them a prolongation. We did that partly because we hope that in the negotiation with generally attorney's office we will be able to find a solution, but unfortunately it didn't happen. When the response was filed, we were shocked, as by the form as by their substance. I will show you the response of their General Attorney's Office. As you even can see, it consists of very few pages and nothing, no document is attached to the response. Which is even more interesting, in their response, they refer to the documents that were attached to our petition. And in their response, the government says that everything they could do was done. They never attach as well any document to support this argument, but they say police, of course police made a lot of actions in order to help him. They deposed, they invited for investigation the clerks from the bank, and they asked the court to grant the order to receive certain documents. But what happened after that? They tried to accuse Vitali in the non-cooperative way of dealing with things, in terms of that they wanted to do certain things and they applied to his lawyer and lawyer didn't respond, but as well nothing supports these arguments. So the question still remains, why didn't they do that? Anyways, it's about police, so police is okay. Police has done everything it could. What about state? What about the governmental office, department that has to supervise the bank's activity, the bank's management? They say that according to the Israeli law that was accepted actually in this period not long ago, the banks had to check the date of their issuing of the new identity cards. And what Vitaly had to do is to go to the Ministry of Interior and ask to renew his identity card. But what is most interesting that he has done that, and it didn't help. There were a lot of cases that actually were opened after that, and there are still cases remaining. And even during this year of our dealing with this case, we closed a lot of such cases. We did. And the last respondent, the most interesting respondent, is Ministry of Interior. The state lawyers quote a law of the population registration that deals with various personal data things that has to be registered, and it says, we are very sorry that it's possible to change a name or a surname or change personal status, but this list is unfortunately exhaustive. We cannot change identification number. We are very sorry, but he had to keep his documents better. But actually it also doesn't help, because even if he would keep his identification card physically, it was stolen. His personal data was falsified even without that. And now we have a very interesting case that police deals with that is based on their stealing of the whole database from one of the governmental institutions with a lot of personal data from one of the ministries, and police didn't find how could it be done. So it can happen to everybody. And the bottom line of the petition is, the bottom line of the response is that they cannot help. So what does the court? The court had to invite us to the hearing, and the court doesn't do that. They only a few days pass after the response of the government was filed, and we receive the verdict. The verdict looks like this. It's also very interesting. Only a few pages, and it seems that the judges just copy and paste things from the response of governmental institutions. No argumentation, no analysis. Why is that so? The judges come to the conclusion that the state is right. It's impossible to change identification number. And they deny our petition. So the last hope that had simple citizen, simply Israeli citizen, Vitaly Surkov, is lost. The highest judge of the Supreme Court, of the High Court of Justice, tells to Vitaly Surkov almost the same thing. In other words, you had to keep the documents better, you had to go to the Ministry of Interior and change, renew your identification card. But what is interesting that he applied to the Ministry of Interior, and minister who tell him the same thing. He has done that. independently. But he could do that before. Nobody had told him about that. He applied to everybody he could, and he was never informed of that. But that's another thing. What is more interesting, that when the court wants to stand by a citizen, wants to intervene, courts, especially Israeli Court of Justice, after former president of Israeli Supreme Court, Mr. Aaron Barak, honored judge Aaron Barak, that has brought a theory of the judges' activism, what he's called as. Judges can do everything. Everything in the world is judgeable. Even very, very political matters that are in a common sense, in the power or in the authority of other governmental institutions, court deals with them because he wants to intervene, because it's interesting to him, because he receives certain dividends in the quotation marks. But in this case, it was not interesting. I will give you just a few examples. When there are petitions filed to the High Court of Justice by their organizations that defend human rights against houses of terrorist abolishments, destructions that made by Israeli government according to its general authority. What is general authority? What is general power? It's not prescribed by the law, but of course government has certain general powers, but maybe there has to be due process of law to destroy a person's house. Court, Israeli Supreme Court, stands by their side. It says, no, you may not do that. This is forbidden. And it brings a very nice argument by general principles of their humankind, moral, human rights, and whatever. He makes what's called this balance of rights, and he comes to the conclusion that it's impossible to make it, and he accepts the petitions. Another example, there was a petition filed by Israeli El Al worker, El Al steward, was named Dan Milevich. It's a very famous precedent decision in Israeli jurisprudence. It's taught in every law faculty on the first year in the constitutional law. This guy wanted to buy a ticket, a free ticket that is granted by El Al, but is by Israeli aviation company, to the spouses. The definition in the law says spouses of its workers. So the question that was dealt with in this verdict was, is a homosexual couple a response to this definition? Is a homosexual spouse a spouse in terms of the law? So Israeli Court of Justice makes a huge judgmental acrobatics, as the honored judge Aaron Barak said himself once in one of his lectures, and he comes to the conclusion that although it's not written expressly, the law based on their general principles and based on their human rights tradition that was still prescribed to us by their state declaration, of course it does include also homosexual couples, and it grants the petition, it accepts the petition, and it gives the order to aviation company to grant a free aviation ticket. it's another example when the court comes to a conclusion by a way that it finds. It wants to come to the conclusion and it finds a way to come to it. Another example is the whole line of verdicts of the Supreme Court that are dealing with all these political matters. When petitions were filed against the separation wall, Israeli Court of Justice, High Court of Justice, found a way to say, well, of course, separation wall is very important. It's important in order to defend Israeli citizens against terrorist attacks. And it found a way to make it legitimate. But here, it was not that interesting. Here there were no dividends of their publication in all these legal magazines, international conferences and such. It was only simply Israeli citizen Vitaly Surkov. That's why courts didn't want to intervene, and he said that he doesn't have a power and that law, the language of law, doesn't let him to intervene and to stand by his side. So what about his dignity? What about his freedom? Where is it? What are all these beautiful words? Not long ago, as you probably know, there was a deal to get back Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. For Gilad Shalit we paid a very high price. We paid for him a price of releasing more than 1,000 terrorists with terrible records. Terrorists that were accused of killing Israeli citizens would never do so. So how did Israeli government find his way to make this deal? Why did he do so? Because it's a life and freedom of Israeli citizen. Okay, because this is Israeli citizen whose parents sat near their house of the prime minister, near the residence of the prime minister for years. They sat there for 5 years. They didn't leave it. And Israeli government finally found the power, although it doesn't exist in the law. There is no such a law. It's just general power of the government, but still they found a way to do so because they wanted to get this result. This deal is very contradictory, and there are a lot of questions that it poses, but still it was done. When Israeli soldier, one Israeli citizen, dignity and freedom are on the stake, we make this balance. But what about the balance in our situation? Where is dignity and freedom of simply Israeli citizen Vitaly Surkov? What actually follows from all this court verdict is that he just has to keep his documents better. So if you want to come to Israel, you should just keep your documents better, because one day you may receive a letter from Israeli bank saying that you owe it $1 million or even more. The sky the limits. We don't agree with this result, and we try to struggle with it, but High Court of Justice is the last instance. We may not file appeal. We may not do anything. He just has to keep his documents better. Thank you for your attention.